Okay, so I move Amendment 1. Minister, the eviction ban, or the deferment, to be more accurate, the deferment of termination dates for certain tenancies is a belated concession on the part of the government to the long-standing demand of many of us here in the opposition that you should ban no-fault evictions, at least for the duration of the housing emergency. I think it should be noted that the Dáil declared an emergency in housing, again in response to pressure, most notably the Raise the Roof demonstration that happened in 2018, and a housing emergency was declared, and that housing emergency is very much still with us. In fact, it is very considerably worsened, and the number of people being evicted into homelessness has increased. And it is our view, therefore, that a ban on people being evicted into homelessness when they have done nothing wrong should last at least until the housing emergency is over. And we think that is constitutionally sound, because I think it is the fact of an emergency that provides deals with any concerns that there might be about the constitutionality of such an eviction ban, just in the same way as unprecedented measures could be taken during the COVID emergency. The housing emergency is something all of us have accepted exists, and therefore extraordinary measures are justified in my view, and I think any fair-minded person would say that the Constitution allows in those circumstances for action to be taken in the interest of the common good. And so this amendment is proposing that as an absolute minimum the ban on evictions should be for at least a year, and indeed we would say beyond that it should be for the duration of any emergency, but at least for a year. Otherwise, we are going to be back to where we were before the ban in the summer, starting at the end of March, the end of this emergency period in this legislation, and by June any protections that it affords will be gone, and evictions will restart. The government has helpfully actually identified the numbers that might be homeless, well over 2,000 people. Just during this emergency period, right? And that gives you a scale, gives you an indication of the scale of the problem. So we think it should be longer, and we also think it should be more comprehensive. I don't even know in the time that is available to us are we going to get to most, in fact we won't get to most of these amendments, but it has been pointed out by us and others, immediately this legislation was published last week, that it doesn't afford the protection to all those who deserve that protection from the possibility of eviction. Because if you have already passed the date for the termination of your tenancy and you are overholding, this bill will not protect you. To cite one example, I'm sure others will cite their examples, there's a couple, a working couple in my area with 2 children, who passed their date for termination of their tenancy on grounds of sale last Friday week, and they have nowhere to go from a house that they have lived in since the 1950s. They were born in the house, and they're being evicted by a landlord who's multiple properties, and they have nowhere to go. They're trying everything. They're over the income threshold, so the council are humming and hawing about the possibility of buying the tenancy. That's something you should also address. Just because you're over the threshold doesn't mean you don't face the prospect of being homeless, right? The council should step in and secure their tenancy by buying that property. But at the very, very least, families like that who are overholding, and there are many, many of them, should be protected by this ban, and they are not. And I'd like you to respond to that and explain why that is the case. And before anybody whispers to you that we can't have retrospective legislation or something of that sort, I would remind you that's what you did during the COVID eviction ban. There was nobody could be evicted out of their home, full stop. It wasn't deferment of termination dates, you couldn't be evicted. There is absolutely no fairness or reason not to protect people who are overholding. Most of the people who are overholding on the advice of their local housing department in any event, because they go to the local housing department and they say, I'm being evicted on grounds of sale, I've done nothing wrong, can you help me? Have you got any social housing for me? No. Or I'm over the threshold, or you'll be waiting 20 years and we've no emergency accommodation, i.e. we've nowhere to go. And what do the council say? You better overhold your tenancy. That's what they tell them. It's informal, but you know it's true. It's happening in every single local authority housing department. The housing officials will say, overhold. We might have something for you in a few weeks or a few months. That's what happens, right? So those people should not be put in that position, and this bill should protect them, and then that protection should last the full duration of the housing emergency, and the government should obviously use the intervening months to take the sort of measures which will mean we won't have an avalanche of evictions next year. We propose many of those things to you today: to buy up more of the developer property on a much bigger scale than we're doing now, to buy up properties where people are threatened with eviction. And can I just reiterate, and I'll finish on this because I know others have to get in, if people are over the thresholds but are faced with the possibility of homelessness, they should be protected too, and the local authorities should be willing to step in and buy that property, because they don't have to be eligible for social housing. If you're over the threshold, you should be eligible for cost rental or affordable housing. Therefore, there should be public funds available to purchase those houses as well. And that should be done to prevent more people ending up in homelessness or in emergency situations. So I hope you will accept the amendment, and I hope beyond that you will take up and respond indeed to the points that I've made about those who are not protected by this legislation.